There's a lot of panic in the White House, especially with Donald Trump. They're very upset and they're very concerned. And why? Well, part of it is this 218th vote in the House of Representatives that will allow a discharge petition so they can place a bill on the floor by going around Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson can't shut it down. And we're, of course, talking about the Epstein files and how the House of Representatives wants to have them, the DOJ, release the files. This is causing a lot of concern. And it makes you wonder, why are they concerned? These are the same people that said, we must release the files, we must release the files. Then they get elected, they're in office, and they say, yeah, let's not do that. Donald Trump is upset about this. And as we know, there's a lot of leaks that come out of the White House. There's a lot of people leaking shit out. And there was apparently one leak that said Donald Trump is going around. I don't understand why people are so concerned about these Epstein files. I don't get it. They just don't understand what it was like in the 90s in Palm Beach. Wow. Donnie, are you confessing? Are you admitting there's some fucked up stuff going on way back when? And now you just don't want people to hear about it? That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know. I don't know. If I'm wrong, release the files and prove me wrong. This is really causing Donald Trump a lot of consternation, making him nervous, making all the Republicans nervous. So when this goes to a vote, what are these people going to do? These Republicans, are they going to vote not to release the files? Yeah, they don't want to do that because the midterm elections are coming up and they're going to have to answer the question as to why. So there's a lot of freaking out going on in Washington, especially in the White House, but even in Congress as well.
This video is for anyone who bought health insurance on the ACA marketplace. But if that does not describe you, please still stick around because our country is on the brink of a legitimate healthcare disaster, and I desperately need y'all's help. Here's what's going on. Unless Congress intervenes in the coming weeks, the cost of health insurance is set to go up by about 75% for millions of Americans come the new year. That is quite literally thousands of dollars more each month. Money that, frankly, most families do not have to spend right now. The reason for this massive cost increase is twofold. First, health insurance companies have asked regulators to allow an increase in premium rates, citing this guy's big, beautiful bill, as well as the impact that his tariffs are likely to have on the cost of things like medications and medical equipment. Second, and this is the really, really big one, the enhanced premium tax credits that helped make ACA coverage more affordable for most Americans are set to expire at the end of 2025, and Congress has yet to take action to extend them. And that is where you come in, and why I say I need your help. People enrolled in the ACA are about to start receiving letters in the mail from their health insurance company notifying them of how much the cost of their existing health insurance plan will go up in the new year. If you receive one of these letters, please take a photo of it and send it to me. I will not publicly share any letter sent to me, and you are welcome to redact every bit of personal information from that letter before sending it to me, as long as the dollar amount is still visible. When you send it, please share with me what impact this cost increase would have on you and your family. Things like, will you be able to afford it? If not, how is that going to impact you and your family? Are you going to have to cut other things out of your budget to make it happen, or is it just not possible? You can share as much or as little as you are comfortable sharing. My goal here is to help voters see the very real people, real lives, and very, very real devastation that will be caused here if Congress does not intervene. Again, nothing that you send to me will be shared publicly unless I have your explicit permission to share it. And please help me get this call out to as many people as possible by reposting this video and engaging with it in all of the ways possible. My videos are getting suppressed right now, as a lot of other content creators are also experiencing. So anything you can do to help me get this call out there to folks is so, so appreciated.
Oh my God, Trumpers, here we go. I got a good one for you. Take a listen.
I was covering you on the campaign trail. You told Joe Rogan that the difference between Harris and Trump is that Trump is not trying to censor his fellow Americans. Wondering if you can square your fervent belief in free speech with what's going on now with Jimmy Kimmel and the FCC pressure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on both of those.
Well, look, on the free speech conversation, I'm pretty sure that Jimmy Kimmel was back on the air last night, and to the extent that he's not back on the air, it's because he's not funny and has terrible ratings. This is not...
He is funny, and he has great ratings, and he's back on TV because us Americans boycotted all of that. ABC, Disney, people started canceling trips, people started canceling their subscription, and that's how Jimmy Kimmel got back on her. Jimmy Kimmel can say whatever the hell he wants to about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was just an average guy. He wasn't nothing special. He was probably a great father, great husband, all that stuff, but he wasn't doing anything heroic. He didn't go inside of a burning building to save a bunch of kids. He didn't go up here and try to save a bunch of people. He didn't run into a 9/11 building or nothing. He was just an average guy who didn't deserve to be killed, but just a normal guy. So Jimmy Kimmel can say whatever he wants to say, okay? And Donald Trump wants to censor everybody because Donald Trump don't like us exposing his truth. And his truth is liar, hypocrite, deceitful, terrible president, on and on and on. So, again, and that goofball, J.D. Vance, he's a damn puppet on a string. So, either way, MAGAs, go fuck yourselves.
Okay, folks, next week our country changes forever, and I need you to be prepared for it. No violence, no violence. That would be the worst possible thing you could do. It would play right into their hands. And don't panic. Don't panic. I'll tell you why. So, Texas Paul, hope your coffee's as good as mine. Hell, I hope it's better. Yeah, this is the end of September, and next week they're about to decapitate the military. Pete Hegseth has called a meeting of well over 100 of our top generals. That give you an idea. I think there's only like 475 top generals and admirals, not top, but total generals and admirals. I think there's like 475. He's called a meeting of over 100 of them. They're going to decapitate the military next week. That's what's going on. They've been moving towards that. The plans that they've been putting together, they've been calling a consolidation of leadership, and this is the Nazi playbook. They already did it with ICE. They did it with ICE. The $100 million they put into ICE was exactly the Nazi playbook. They went out and recruited out of the militias, and that's why they wear the mask, so you can't identify where they got these people from. Now the next step is decapitate the military and create super generals. These are generals that they're going to have basically ad campaigns for. They're going to get the nationalists behind them, the rah nationalists behind these generals to make superstars out of them, because they're sycophants that they can control, that will do anything that they're told. This will be the end of your country as you know it, but I need you to not panic, and this is why. You can stop this. You may not be able to stop these generals from being fired and removed, but you can stop this entire thing. A country of 330 million people that will not be governed cannot be governed. It's that simple. It's that simple. Protest, fight, boycott, fight economically. Close your wallet and sit your ass down. Folks, a bunch of unarmed Indians ran the most powerful empire at the time, the British, out of India by simply sitting their asses down. You can do that too. You can do that too. Most of these major corporations run on loans. If you just stop spending, they fold. Do you understand where the power is? You have the power. Use it, and use it wisely. Any violence plays into their hands.
Donald Trump's overreach is backfiring. Let me explain. I'm an independent journalist that's been covering Donald Trump for over a decade now. I've made appearances on MSNBC, CNN, I write a newsletter on Substack, and I document it every single day of Trump's first term. And right now, he's doing what he always does, dramatically overreaching and backfiring on himself politically. What we have to understand is that Trump is trying to seize power that he does not yet have. From his crackdowns on free speech to his threatened deployments to cities he has no jurisdiction in, he is trying to flex because he's trying to seek power under the guise of these false emergencies he's been declaring, right? So what we saw is after the Charlie Kirk murder, an effort to exploit the murder for his political gain, right? He talked about targeting liberal groups. He's talked about targeting his political enemies. He's trying to now charge James Comey. He's going after people in a really, really, aggressive way. But what we saw after the Jimmy Kimmel push, when the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, explicitly threatened the licenses of ABC affiliates, they did try to pressure Disney, right? They followed his whim. But Disney has said no, and they brought Jimmy Kimmel back on air. That is very important, and I'll tell you why. Every single time someone defies Trump, whether it's a corporation, an individual, a cultural institution, his power lessens. And it showed right there with the Jimmy Kimmel move. He's already trying to back off the FCC threats, right? His power is what we give him in these early stages of him trying to consolidate power, right? He has not yet been given unilateral authority by the Supreme Court yet, although he has notched way too many wins there. But a lot of this is up to us, corporations, individuals, journalists, to push back and say no when he tries to flex his power. And that's what happened with Disney. We saw also in the Eastern District of Virginia, the prosecutor's office, where Eric Siebert, they tried to pressure him to charge Comey and his other political enemies or perceived political enemies, and Eric Siebert said no, right? And he resigned because the prosecutor's office determined there's not enough evidence. Of course, he's installed Lindsey Halligan, who's now trying to move forward with those charges, but nonetheless, that resignation did damage to the perception of this prosecution, right? And although these things may seem small, they're important. As we talked about in my last video, Donald Trump is underwater politically right now. His approval ratings have been tanking. He's underwater in immigration, the economy, inflation. He's lost ground with key demographics from the Latino community to the black community to young people. He is eroding, and he is afraid of losing the midterms. And that's what's driving a lot of these authoritarian decisions, right? And that's why these moves are so important, because these little acts of defiance, big and small, limit his power in the short term. It buys more time so that we can get to that point in the midterms in which he will become a politically crippled, lame duck president on his way out of his second term. To paraphrase Nemec from Andor, which you can go watch on Disney Plus now that Jimmy's back, you can go reactivate your Disney Plus account, is basically even the most random, small acts of resistance push the line forward. And that's what we're seeing here. Disney saying no prevented a potential contagion of other corporations that might fold or even preemptively comply with any subtle reference to their programming or any host that Trump doesn't like to be removed. This is a line that was drawn. We saw this also with Harvard trying to push back on what Trump was trying to do and influencing how they handled their school. And again, these are all important because right now we're in the stage where it's about resisting and not complying. If you comply, you give Trump the power that he does not yet have. Again, he does not yet have unilateral power. A lot of it is pressure, trying to make free speech expensive, trying to pressure corporations. So the more these acts of defiance happen, the weaker Trump is. And we saw a lot of that in this last week. There's still a lot to be worried about, still a lot happening, but I wanted to highlight these small points of resistance and defiance as indicators of how the country's responding. And also recent polls continue to show Trump at second-term lows. All right? So keep up the hope, keep moving forward. You can check out my newsletter. I'm a journalist. I'm going to keep pushing on my end. And we all got to do our part. All right.
I watched Trump's press conference with the president of Turkey as well as the one in the afternoon where he signed executive orders so you don't have to, and here's my overview. We'll start with the craziest thing he said, which is just a direct quote. I settled, as you know, 7 wars, and it's probably more than that if you really want to know the real facts. So it's somewhere between 8 and infinity wars that he settled now. All right, let's get into the meat of it. They spoke for like 25 minutes. He mentioned Biden 4 separate times, and on 3 separate occasions, he had to ask the reporter to repeat the question they were asking. He starts off the whole thing by saying that he was in exile for 4 years after the rigged 2020 election. So he, 1, doesn't know what exiled means, but 2, doesn't believe the 61 judges who said that there was not enough evidence, including the 17 that he put on the bench himself. He's talking about some guy, Pastor Brunson, who he said was in prison in Turkey for 35 years. You can look it up. It was 2 years. It was actually just under 2 years that he was in prison. And then it might have been a mistake, right? No, he repeats that number, 35 years again, just a minute later. Regarding Erdogan, he says he generally doesn't like opinionated people, but he loves him. He says millions of people have been killed in the conflict in Ukraine, and then gives the number 7,818 last week, which is a high number because he usually says 5 to 7,000. But if you took that number, 7,818 times 52 times 4 for the 4 years that it's been going on, that's 1.6 million people. So even if it were true, the numbers that he said, and they were for a full 4 years, and it was that high number the entire time, it still wouldn't be millions. I only bring this up because he does it every time a female reporter with an accent comes up and asks a question. He goes, "Where are you from?" Before saying anything else about the question, where are you from? He says he could potentially have the issue in Palestine resolved today. Then he's talking about NATO countries, and because he knows nothing about NATO, whenever NATO gets brought up, he just brings up the fact that they were paying 2%, now they're paying 5%, and that's trillions of dollars. I'm going to do some math for you real quick. Okay, the GDP of the US is about 30 trillion. The GDP of the entire NATO organization is about 65 trillion. So if you remove the US from that, you're talking about 35 trillion. If those 35 trillion GDP was paying at 2%, it would be $700 billion that they were paying. If they increase that to 5%, it would be $1.75 trillion that they're paying. So it's actually just an increase of 1 trillion, not trillions like he's saying. And also all of the data I can find shows that these countries are still not actually contributing 5%. And also the US was never contributing 5%. He's talking about the hostages, and he keeps doing the weird thing that he does where he's like, I don't want 1 now and 2 in 2 months and then 2 at some later point. I just want all 20 hostages now and all 38 dead bodies that are over there. When talking about Ukraine, he says, Erdogan is neutral, so am I like being neutral. So he does not support either Russia or Ukraine in that conflict, according to his own word. He said again that he thought the Ukraine conflict would be super easy to settle, like he said day one, right? But that he's really disappointed in Putin for making it this hard. He also says he doesn't want to call anyone a paper tiger, but Putin has spent millions of dollars and spent a bunch of lives to gain basically no land. He says for 2,000 years, Turkey has been trying to take over Syria and that Erdogan was the one who was able to get it done, even though as far as I know, Syria is still its own country. And then he later says that they've been fighting for over 1,000 years. I'm just going to remind you, both the Byzantine and Ottoman empires have controlled and administered Syria in that time period, and that Turkey itself as a country is only 101 years old. He says if the government shuts down, that's going to be on the Democrats because they just want unreasonable things. He says that they want to give money to illegals illegally and that they want open borders. I'll get into it in the press conference that he does later, but he also does say transgender for everyone. So I guess I should dress appropriately. These shirts are still available if you want to get one for yourself. He also says that they're going to take some of the tariff money that they're getting, which he claims is coming from other countries, and they're going to give it to farmers because farmers are being hurt because the tariffs haven't kicked in yet. But once they kick in, the farmers are going to be richer than they've ever been before. Then he tells a little anecdote about how someone came in, they said, there's $31 billion that we can't find. And he says, check the tariff shelf. And apparently they came back to him the next day after having checked the tariff shelf and said, that was exactly it. That $31 billion that came from American citizens, because all a tariff is a tax on American citizens, is where it came from. So he's bragging about all the money that you were paying to his government to bail out farmers for the shitty trade practices that he's enacting. Even though we still don't actually have a motive, he claims that the shooting at the ICE facility was caused by radical left-wing rhetoric, and then immediately after that says that Jasmine Crockett is dumb and a low IQ individual. Nothing divisive about that rhetoric at all. Here's a direct quote that he gives regarding the increased tensions between the left and the right in this country. Bad things happen when they play these games. To give you a little clue, the right is a lot tougher than the left, but the right's not doing this. He immediately after that says, the left better not get the right energized. That would not be good for the radical left. Is that not a threat? Is that not a threat? I mean, anyone at all going to claim that that is not a threat. He at one point says that Todd Blanche is the attorney general. Now, Todd Blanche is the deputy attorney general, but it's funny that he doesn't know anyone within his own cabinet. He also says that Comey is a bad person and that he's a sick person, and he says he's a sick person twice. That concludes his meeting with Erdogan. Now, if you've made it this far, you're probably going to watch to the end of this, or at least for quite a bit longer. So I'm now going to cover what happened in his press conference, where he was signing executive orders to bring back the death penalty in DC, I guess, and to dismantle Antifa, which is just an idea. And he signed one other one. That one's not all that important. For this presser, he happened to speak for about 50 minutes, and he mentioned Biden 5 separate times. If you're keeping track, that's 9 total Bidens in about 75 minutes of talking. So, he's really on a roll with the Bidens there. He says if he could make TikTok 100% MAGA-related content, he would. There's a lot of inconsistencies between what he's saying and what his cabinet members who are there are saying about the TikTok sale. He literally is talking as if the sale has already been done. At one point, they ask him, do you have any concerns about security with TikTok? And he says no, because it's being run by great American companies. But then his cabinet correctly identifies the fact that it has not been sold and that they're working on a deal, and China had some resistance, but now they're willing to go through with it. He's talking about some of the people who might be involved in the purchasing of TikTok, and one of the people he mentions is Mike Lindell. The MyPillow guy who uses Nazi references in the prices that he sets for his pillows that he sells online. He's talking about the farmers who he's going to have to bail out for his second straight administration, and he says they provide us with everything, like all of the food we eat, and sometimes we eat too much. And he goes, at least I know I do. Yeah, brother, we all know that you eat too much. As if any of the stuff that he eats comes from a farm and not a McDonald's drive-thru. I'm going to give you my next 3 points just exactly as I wrote them down, because at this point, I don't think they need any more explanation as to why I put them in my notes of crazy things that he's saying. But he says, the cost of energy is way down, Democrats want transgender for everyone, and Mamdani is a communist. He's talking about the National Guard in DC, and he's very proud of the fact that they are picking up trash and making the city beautiful again. And he does not understand that's not the job of these people. A National Guards person generally has a separate job that they do. And so they're being pulled away from their family, pulled away from their actual job, and they are picking up trash in DC, and he couldn't be more proud. When he signs the executive order to go after the death penalty for more criminals in DC, he says it's very fitting because capital city, capital punishment. God, the word association with this man is just mwah, chef's kiss. When talking about Antifa and going after the people who are quote unquote funding Antifa, again, Antifa is just an idea, that idea being anti-fascism. He says that they are all anarchists and professional agitators. And the way that he knows that is because the signs are so good, they couldn't have been made in someone's basement. They have to be professionally made signs. So to all the people who have signs that are good enough that Donald Trump thinks that you're a paid agitator, congratulations, you make a great sign. Send me one. Here's a direct quote that I would be happy to give you context on if any existed at all. Many people have died over the years in Portland. Just that. And finally, to round the whole thing out, he says that you can't walk a block in Memphis without getting shot. All right, 10%ers, there you go. A 2 for 1 in just 8 minutes. I didn't know that I'd be able to fit that all in, but as I was going through the Erdogan stuff, it was pretty obvious I was going to get through. Again, he invites these world leaders into the Oval Office. He sits down with them. He talks for literally 3 minutes and then goes, "Are there any questions?" And then he lets reporters just ask him questions he is not capable of answering at all. And again, when Erdogan was talking in Turkish, of course, he at one point goes, "I don't understand your language. What did you say?" Hilarious. Also, a little throwback here. If you've made it this far and somehow are not following me, please go ahead and do that. It does not hurt you, but it does help me. Also, do like, comment, share. Those things really do help a lot to spread out the video.
I just got done listening to Stephen Miller saying that they just signed an executive order going after Antifa and trying to destroy all organizations that they run. And I'm first thinking to myself, yeah, what are the addresses? All right, because I think that's very important. But then they go off on a wild tangent and start making baseless claims about what Antifa is doing without providing any evidence.
Steve, could you say a couple of words?
Yes, Mr. President. This is a very historic and significant day. This is the first time in American history that there is an all-of-government effort to dismantle left-wing terrorism, to dismantle Antifa, to dismantle the organizations that have been carrying out these acts of political violence and terrorism. What we have seen, if you look at whether it be going back to the riots that started with Black Lives Matter and all the way through to the Antifa riots, the attacks on ICE officers, the doxing campaigns, and now the political assassinations, these are not lone, isolated events. This is part of an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. It is structured, it is sophisticated, it is well-funded, it is well-planned. There is really no parallel like this to anything else in the country right now. There is an entire system of feeder organizations that provide money, resources, weapons, and when they're attacking ICE officers, they're attacking federal buildings, or they're isolating public officials for harassment, doxing, intimidation, and ultimately attempted assassination. It is all carefully planned, executed, and thought through. It is terrorism on our soil. Because of this executive order, Cash and Pam are going to have the tools they need, working with Scott, to take these organizations apart piece by piece. And the central hub of that effort is going to be the Joint Terrorism Task Force, or JTTF, which sits inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But for those at home who are worried about terrorism in this country, they need to understand, because of President Trump's strength, because of his vision, because of his leadership, we are now going to use the entire force of the federal government to uproot these organizations root and branch. And again, that's only possible because of President Trump and his leadership.
See, what Stephen Miller and them are doing is they're setting the stage for what we all know is ultimately going to happen. Governor Gavin Newsom, he's been talking about it. Goodbye to having free and fair elections. This looks like they are paving the road and creating a roadmap to militarize cities all over the country so that folks won't be able to go in and vote these demons out of office.
Steve Cash, please.
As Steve was saying, Mr. President, thanks to your leadership, crime is going downward in a tremendous fashion, and that's what we want for every city in America. And the FBI's premier flagship enterprise, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, are honored to lead this initiative with our partners at Treasury and Homeland Security, because our citizens are being attacked by, as Stephen said, organized violence, and it's being paid for, not by them, by other people. So what we are going to do, combining forces as Scott and I have done in these last few months, is follow the money. People and organizations have collected funds and put them out into the streets of America and organized violence across our country. And thanks to your recognition of this and this executive order and the AG's leadership to lead out and prosecute these individuals, we are properly going to chase them down like the domestic terrorists that they are, and our streets and our communities will be safer because the JTTF and the FBI and Treasury and DHS and DOJ are going to combine forces like never before to root out this new evil that is perpetrating our criminal activities across our societies. And we are just so thankful for your leadership and recognition of it. It's not easy to do.
Good job. Thank you very much, Pam.
Oh my gosh. Cash Patel? Seriously, bro? You couldn't find the Epstein files, but you got time to put together teams to go after fictitious groups out here. Wow. What a slap in the face of every American who's watching their tax dollars being thrown down the drain with these ridiculous publicity stunts that we all know at the end of the day aren't going to achieve any measurable results.
What?
Besides Antifa, is there a specific group or person you're targeting in this?
Any organized group.
Any organized group who are committing these crimes, and we're working with the Secretary of Treasury. You know what law enforcement has told us under President Trump's leadership? He's taken the handcuffs off law enforcement. They can do their jobs now, thanks to you, President Trump, and that's what's happening. And all of these agencies that Cash mentioned, we work hand in hand together. Our prosecutors were following the money with Treasury. We're working with Homeland Security. Cash's agents, all of our agents, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, combined, are working and with state and local government to take these people off the streets who are jeopardizing lives.
Oh my gosh, did we just see Pam Bondi? Pam, I thought you were about to indict former FBI Director James Comey, because if you do that, what I'm hearing word around town is all you're going to do is make his book sales go through the roof, because I hear that the charges aren't even that strong, right? So this is another publicity stunt, and I'm going to ask the same question, all right? Could you all please stop wasting the taxpayers' money and do that one thing you said you were going to do with the Epstein files and release them?
Can I just illustrate this? So I was talking with Cash and Stephen about this a couple of days ago, sir. So I believe it was in Oregon where you had a federal building where there were men in black ski masks who were committing acts of violence, who were shutting down a government building. To the president's point, they don't come from...
And I'm not even going to address what JD just did. All they're doing is throwing gasoline on a fire they've created to try to get some sort of reaction. Because, you know, that's all they're doing is trying to gaslight everyone in the United States. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, this is what Donald Trump does. No relief when it comes to inflation. No relief when it comes to groceries. No ending of the conflicts, you know, Ukraine and Russia, you know, Israel, Hamas, none of that. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, none of that. The government is on the verge of possibly shutting down. Goodbye to your Medicare, your SNAP benefits, and your Medicaid, right? Nothing to help the everyday Americans. All he's doing is exacting revenge on his political rivals, and he's making us taxpayers foot the bill. And don't get me started on the tariffs, which we all know are basically a peacetime tax that he's levied on us for no good reason, all right? Grocery prices, like I said, are going through the roof. Our utility bills, they're not getting cut in half. They've been doubled. And these guys and gals are in the Oval Office playing games with the American people. What a disgrace. Anybody that's still supporting this administration, I just got one question. Actually, it might be two questions. When did you start hating yourself? And when did you start hating the country?
So here in the New Jersey governor's race, we have kind of an interesting situation going on today. It looks like the National Archives illegally released a completely unredacted version of the Democratic candidate Mikey Sherrill's military record. And it was illegal. And Jack Ciattarelli, who was the MAGA nut who was running against Sherrill here, had requested Sherrill's military record from the National Archives, which is not unusual. That's done. If you're looking for, opposition research on your opponent, you're looking for some shit that you could get them with, you might request that. But certain parts of that are private and confidential, and they just cannot be released in their entirety, unredacted. Well, it looks like that's what happened. Now, there's no suggestion that Jack Ciattarelli, the MAGA nut who's running here in Jersey, had anything to do with it. And we don't know if it was just a mistake at the National Archives, but that would be one hell of a glaring fucking mistake. Or there was some MAGA nuts at the National Archives who was somehow involved in releasing Sherrill's records that just chose to do this. And so I'm just reading something from some information from a letter that some Democratic members of our local legislators wrote in a publication called Inside New Jersey. Today we learned that records linked to Congressman Sherrill's military service were illegally released as part of an unsuccessful attempt to tarnish her reputation. This unprecedented act is a serious violation of privacy, from putting her social security number on nearly every page to disclosing sensitive personal information about her and her family, in a blatant breach of clear protocols for handling sensitive documents. This is a dangerous and corrupt attempt to weaponize the federal government for political purposes and meddle in New Jersey's fall elections. Determining all individuals involved in this illegal act
and punishing them to the full extent of the law is essential to restoring public trust, blah, blah, blah. Cheryl has a well-documented record of serving our country. She was a Navy helicopter pilot, a federal prosecutor, a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. She has a proven track record. This isn't, here in New Jersey, this isn't going to have any effect. She's currently in every poll except one. She's currently up so far against Chitterelli, the MAGA nut, by 8 or 9 points. There was one, so you had the outlying polls. One had her up by 10 points, and one had them tied. That one that had them tied was an internal poll that was released publicly by Chitterelli's his campaign. So I'm not terribly worried. I'm still a little bit worried because that gap can close over the next couple of weeks as we head toward Election Day, and I would prefer. Cheryl have an 11 or 12 point lead right now, but so I'm a little anxious, a little nervous that this isn't a done deal yet. And there's Cheryl was in the Naval Academy when there was some sort of a cheating scandal. Chitterelli has been trying to make hay of that here in Jersey, but it's failed over and over again. She simply made the argument because she wasn't accused of cheating, right? She simply made the argument that her mistake or her fuck up in that was not turning in her her fellow classmates. And that seems to have satisfied the folks in, at least as far as polling goes, voters in New Jersey. And tying Chitterelli to the validity of Donald Trump seems to be significantly more successful as well. I expect, as the public here in general, and even the public here in New Jersey doesn't give a shit about anything until fucking Election Day anyway. If this story does make it out where anybody else knows about it except like me and you, and the few other people who care, I imagine this is not going to work into Chitterelli's favor. He already looks like a corrupt schmuck with his although he's trying to back away from some of the Village Idiots policies. It's too late. He's already tied to them. And this particular scandal coming out now will only make him look like more of a criminal. She's a not decorated, but she's a successful military veteran, helicopter pilot, former federal prosecutor. What's he going to do? He's going to look like the schmuck, corrupt crook that, he sort of is. So, we'll see what happens.